plus forest poets Barry Coidan and Jenni Hall, who are both going to read a couple of poems at the beginning. So first of all, I'll introduce Barry Coidan. Barry's been writing for about 6 years. He was commended in last year's Winchester Poetry Competition that was judged by Andrew McMillan. He has a wife and 2 cats, ladies and gentlemen, and he hopes to be taking a trip to the Antarctic again next year if South America has opened up by then. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Barry Coidan.
That's lovely. Okay, thank you very much for that. And straight on to the first poem. The title is Observing Earth from a Comet. Deepest dark, rushing, streaming, scintillating, dirty, ice sublimating, slow rotations, eons accreting, birth and fire. Hot Jupiter roars, condensing into the chill. Unperturbed, I hurtle towards a startled star, and tumult where young Venus and Mars held promise, resolved over 1 million revolutions, pearly moon deep scarred, partnering a world engined by slow dying U-238, fueling deep seduction, sky touching peaks, soaked in my kindred's death throes, H2O. 100,000 journeys beyond Kuiper, beyond Oort, chilled to near absolute, then hammering past Einstein's Mercury, fiery oppressive Venus, glimpsed red Mars dying, and attracted by Earth, moth-like vaporized, lightening up her sky. And the next poem, slightly different. My life is a pig. I live in squalor. Also, I would have you, but it suits me to be considered filthy, no manners, education, or artistic taste. But I dream. A porcine world is rich with a sense of woods, mud, and piss. I sniff out nature's treasures, conjuring up truffles. The sweet country girl feeds me oatcakes and treacle. I nuzzle her, and we whisper love grunts. I trot ahead composing poems in the mud. She strokes my rump with a fallen branch. I paint in arms, urine and shit. With the smell of my captivity, I conjure up my old inheritance and heady chases in royal parks and forests. My old age passes quietly, toothless, fed, soft gruel, lying contentedly on clean straw in my pigsty, a creature of some sensibilities and taste. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Barry. Thank you for the love grunt. Hey guys, if you want to go back on mute again. So our next poet from Forest Poets is Jenni Hall. Jenni is an educational publisher who lives in East London with her young family. Her work is rooted in nature and the British folk tale and song tradition. And Jenni has appeared in Forest Poets anthologies and a Guardian online masterclass. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jenni Hall.
Thanks very much. I'm going to start with something old in all senses. This is from a sequence that I wrote some time ago, responding to the Thomas the Rhymer border ballads. It might be useful to know a little bit of background. So Thomas the Rhymer, he meets with the Queen of Elfland, and is so seduced by her that he agrees to go and serve her in Elfland for 7 years, during which time He's not allowed to speak. And at the end of 7 years, she gives him the gift of prophecy, or the tongue that can never lie. So he becomes True Thomas. And he is apparently a real person. So I'm just going to share on the screen, if I can find it, a photo of me at the Rhymer's Stone, where this is allegedly where Thomas of Ercilston met with the Fairy Queen and is the inspiration behind the ballad. Let me just, one moment. See not ye that bonny road? Look down the path in the heavy air and see yourself stepping out on stars of borage, love in the mist, speedwell, time, heady aromatics underfoot, meadow sweet at the margins. Go further, and black bryony pearls the path edges, tugs at your sleeve. Lords and ladies spur at your heels, and, nestled in damp coils of fern, gleams enchanter's nightshade. Silvering of bells pulls you on, straining to hear the whisper of skin within silk sleeve, whose trailing edge left this grass-green pennant on the hawthorn that you will take and place in your breast like a favour. By the time you can hear the waves and taste the salt and iron, meadow sweet will already be thick in your throat, cloying, closing, reminding you not to speak. And now something new, which was, it grew really from the image in the first line, from looking at the strange tan lines that you get. Bladder wreck. She's got that new mum tan, beach brown across the knuckles from pushing the pram. And twin oyster shells slump beneath her eyes, skin nacreous from no sleep. A silver tide ebbs round her forehead's dry margins, washes into the brown. Breasts like stranded sea jellies, crazed with blue. Below, the intertidal zone of her belly is rippled with purple patterns, Lena Negra drawn broken brown through the dimpled sand. Inside, she is chaotic with colour, kaleidoscoping light to dark, changing each hour. And at the nub, the core, tender, still new rubbed red raw.
Yay, thank you so much, Jenny. Particularly love all the sea imagery in your last poem there, Bladder Wreck. Thank you very much. And now we come to our main reader. And I'm sure you all know that George Szirtes was born in Hungary and has lived in Britain for most of his life after coming to Britain as a refugee at the age of 8. He's won the Geoffrey Faber Memorial Prize and the T.S. Eliot Prize, and his translations from Hungarian poetry, fiction and drama have also won numerous awards. His recent memoir of his mother, The Photographer at 16, which you might have heard of being serialized on Radio 4 very recently, won the East Anglian Book Prize and the James Tate Black Memorial Prize. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome George Szirtes.
Well, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Certainly can.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be with you. And it's going to be a strange reading in a way, because I'm going to be reading requests. In fact, to my great surprise, I've had more than one request. So I can actually fill up the program with requests, which I'm actually going to do. I'll tell you something about each little poem as it comes along. And it's a variety of material from various different times and different periods of my work. So I shall go to share screen now. And I shall leave it just like that, because I should be scrolling up. This first poem was requested by a splendid poet, John Glendale. I'm very flattered to be asked by him. It's a kind of love sonnet, and it more or less speaks for itself. In the hotel room. In the hotel room, in the dim lamplight, in her black slip, she turned her head this way and that in the soft glow. It was all too fragile. The darkness, the faint curve of her lip, the slant cut of her hair, since nobody could know just when the hard light of the corridor might burst into that tenderest space and prove space illusion. Whether it was his hand or the bedside light that came first to define what she felt like, such moments of vision were rare, with most blossoming suddenly out of too little. It is hard being in darkness and light all at once, to be sheltered yet vulnerable, now solid, now brittle, to be subject of both self-construction and chance. Everything remains in its stillness, while also in flight. Love and the skin, love and the nerves, love, time, and night. Now this one a little, this is a poem I'm reading for Harriet Proudfoot. It begins with this line from John Donne, "Oh, my America, my Newfoundland." It's about the figure of Actaeon. It was a commissioned poem for a Titian painting. I don't know whether you know the Titian painting, but the way he depicts it, Actaeon, of course, comes upon Diana and her maids, and they're there naked, bathing in a pool. And he doesn't mean to come upon them. He seems to sort of move aside a cloth, and there they are. And it's always reminded me that red cloth is a bit like a washing line. So bad luck for him, because then she decides to turn him into a stag, and he is consumed by his hounds. And the speaker here is Actaeon himself, who turns into a stag in the course of the poem. Oh, my America, discovered by slim chance, behind, as it seemed, a washing line I shoved aside without thinking. Does desire have thoughts, or define its object, consuming all in a glance? You, with your several flesh, sinking upon itself in attitudes of hurt, while the dogs at my heels growl at the strange red shirt under a horn moon. You, drinking night water. Tell me what the eye steals or borrows. Why can't we let go without protest? My own body turns against me, and I sense it grow contrary. Whatever night reveals is dangerously toothed. And so the body burns as if torn by sheer profusion of skin and cry. It wears its ragged dress like something it once found comfort in, the kind of comfort even a dog learns by scent. So flesh falls away, ever less human, like desire itself, though pain still registers in a terrible balance the mind seems so reluctant to retain. Oh, my America, my nakedness. This is for Nell Hardingham. It's part of this poem appears in The Photographer at 16. A little background for this. My mother was born in Transylvania, and I went to her birth city to try and find the house in which she used to live. I don't know whether I did so, but one of the things she remembers, she was very ill in her childhood. She had rheumatic fever, which she caught in the house, which was damp, is that she was off school for something like a year, and she would look out of her window and see her friends skating on a pond in the park opposite. So that is the pond, and there are the skaters. We're here to look for something, perhaps a house buried half in a hill with damp walls, a jutting terrace, and a long view across the park to an artificial lake. Snow falls on the branches, and a surface of sheer ice where a mob of skaters wheel and weave white petals frilled with crystals, Transylvanian lace. My mother's town. The trees are thick with green. Summer. Somewhere, in another place, the skaters move to a frozen music between the trees, performing a slow dance along the brink of a precipice that cannot be seen from where they are. There are lines of ink, impossible to read now. Fountain jets snow. The bandstand is a skating rink full of toy soldiers. Above them, the sun sets and rises and sets again. My mother leans on her elbows. Her brother pirouettes across the lake. She is ill. A tree screens the hidden steps, which lead up to a hot, clear patch of sunlight. The ice cream melts in a derelict house. A flower pot dangles dry stems in the porch. Where are we? The skaters move in the distance, shot through with dead light. Their translucency, their quick black feet remind me of birds. The house says nothing, staring vacantly into the bushes. Above it, vague herds of clouds meander, like soldiers on patrol at a border station between two absurd countries, watching empty wagons roll up and down the track. The skaters rise from the pond. Families stroll among the trees. The fountain dries. The city is full of unshaven faces darting around corners, quick, evasive eyes. These three poems that I've read so far all come from different books at different periods. This is probably the earliest. This is about 1994. The others were a little bit later. Over that. And this is for Dennis Tomlinson. This is a poem set in 1989 in Hungary. We spent most of the year there in the middle of a quiet revolution. So the year was going to finish up with an entirely different political system from the one that we are in at the moment. This is a kind of spring poem. But a little bit more about my mother on this one. My mother spent time in 2 concentration camps, but she returned. Budapest is full of tenement buildings with an awful lot of statuary on the front, stucco, bits of stone, but they're all been damaged. They've been damaged by war, and they were also damaged by the fighting in 1956, the result of which is us coming here. Because they're so full of statues, these buildings, I had this fantasy, and this fantasy appears in this poem, that those statues are actually the people inside the flats, and that when they die, they come through the wall and they emerge, as does my mother in this. So she returns from the camps, as I mentioned in the poem, but instead of stopping in the flat, she just keeps walking until she walks into the wall and out through the wall, becoming a statue. But the poem begins with watching nature in the city in spring. A game of statues. The pond seems to be still, but everywhere, small points of tension gather and stretch. Dead leaves float in cowls, the slab breaks up, the foil begins to tear. The grass is smeared with snowdrops, bluebells, and vetch. The air is a parliament of fowls. Broad avenues and city parks are dressed to kill. Houses put on airs and graces. A hidden population of statues emerges from the shadows to be pressed between the brickwork till the terraces are packed with ancient vices and virtues, pouting and posturing. Their breasts and biceps curve against the sunlight, which first called them out. Even the crippled ones assume survival rights. Forsaking their reserve, they brandish their stigmata. Blank faces shout from pediments, burst into bloom. An air of celebration. Time replies with memory. She mounts a ruined staircase through heaps of rubble. She has come back from the camps and wagons to surprise the world. Each broken window wears her face. Her footsteps are a muffled drum. She knows what she has to do. No need for food. Affection is a cure. The street's hot breath on neck and earlobe, words and sighs. They let her go. The air in the room is good, but better still to pass through it, through death, to this demi-paradise of iron, stone, and stucco. Across the city, thousands are marching past and poking heads and arms through niches, waiting there for common symbols of eternity. Think of them struggling in their vertical beds against the continual nightmare of the wall. The whole street seems to pose and catch the light. Across the ruffled pond, birds are frozen into screams of joy. A single, vaguely comatose statue holds real flowers in her hand. The flowers are dying as she dreams. That is one of a set of poems. A lot of these things that I'm reading are actually part of sequences and so forth. And that was from a book called Bridge Passages back in 1991. The year being referred to is 1989. Now this is for Grant Tarbart, who may or may not be there. He asked for this particular poem, Uncle Zoltan's Plague Times. I'll tell you about Uncle Zoltan. Uncle Zoltan is 300 years old. He possibly has some aristocratic connections. He certainly brags of them. He tells you very long and very unlikely tales. He has an ironic sense of humor. And he appeared to me when I was working on Twitter, and I wrote that 60, 70, 80 Uncle Zoltans, not usually in this verse form, which is 3 haikus plus a single line, which is a form I've been working on. And just one more thing about this, I want to stop at it, it's tiny. The next book, which will come out in October, will contain a number of poems, and I'm sure other poets' books too will written during lockdown. And you're all more or less in this form. And I'll just explain that the poems began with a series at the very early stage of the pandemic, where it wasn't actually here in Britain, but it was, to my mind, like a ship coming in. And later people come in off that ship and they get onto trains, and then you watch them on the trains. So that's where the poem begins. Going Viral is the title of the whole series. So I read on from there. Uncle Zoltan's Plague Times, and I've got 2 poems before the little first chapter about the arrival of the ship. My Uncle Zoltan had an eye for disasters. He'd watch them passing like a smear of crows cursing at the failing light. His Gothic nature sympathized with them, drunk on the melodrama. He was facetious. Sometimes he was right. And this is just looking at it from the point of view of the virus, which also wants to live and thrive. Everything wants life, said the thing, meaning itself. We too struggle on. It was dark by now, and the stars were fine powder, almost invisible. And they did want life, at some expense to others, but that's nothing new. It's just fine powder. And now you get the little bits about the arrival of the plague ship. Think of, I suppose if you can think of the vampire legend. cruiser. Somewhere a cruiser is patrolling the North Sea. You imagine it passing the headland, like your own dream of waking, just turning over, not yet quite conscious, but surfacing from a depth in a darkness. There, beyond the shorelines. Crash. The crush of bodies and faces. It is as if they had just emerged out of an old dream's familiar narrative. But who is dreamer and who dreamt? They move as one dream, with a tired face we take home with us, like handfuls of change. The night train stops here, just at that platform. You will hear it approaching. Here, the journey starts into that plump, hard darkness you will not notice. You will be dreaming of the carriage and the lights in the far distance that sounds like your heart. Something happened there that was not told in stories shaped by memory. Time was part of it. It no longer ran clear, but was broken music, fragments of which lay on the floor, catching the light as if it could make sense of the darkness. The last of this set, night patrol. Now the lights are off and the town is almost dead. The creatures enter on all fours or wings or sheer force of tongue or mind to take their due place in each other's eyes, in their usual habitat, as dream companions we half know by name. We half know them by name because such things, afflictions happen now and then. I won't read all of this because time's going on. This is for Judy Moore. Uncle Zoltan has generated tweets, basically. I work quite a lot on Twitter. I still do. Twitter has generated various creatures, and I'll read you about another one after this. This is Uncle Zoltan. This is the kind of jottings he makes. The critical judgment. This is him on art, on poetry. The critical judgments of the noted celebrity Uncle Zoltan, finally willing to talk straight through his arse. My favorite poem is The Agonies of Duck Roger, said Uncle Zoltan. Though Duck Roger was not really a duck, he added, nor was his name Roger. In terms of verse form, I like the pangolin redoubled, said Uncle Zoltan. Every third word has to be soup, demanding, but unforgettable. O salubrious ecstasy, winged cherub of the universe, Uncle Zoltan recited. I sing it to a ukulele accompaniment when the price is right. This is not the Boris you're thinking of. I can recite the entire poetic output of Boris de Bleek, and will do so at the drop of a hat, said Uncle Zoltan. Got a hat? Zachar Mazok, as you know, is named after if you name masochism, but it's also torta, a cake. My Zachar torta sonnets take some beating, said Uncle Zoltan. Well, then you're used to that. You could start with the feet. I love heroic couplets, said Uncle Zoltan. The more heroic, the better. I want couplets that will die in a ditch for me, guns blazing. So Uncle Zoltan's that kind of gentleman. Langostine, this is as Langostine Villanelle. So Langostine also appeared in prose tweets originally. Langostine is a lobster. She became the heroine of several 200 or 300 tweets. There are whole little kind of dialogues between her and the doctor. Now, the doctor was a real melancholy doctor who one day went down to Cromer Beach and found himself turned into a crab. He was crabby, so he became a crab. He meets Langostine and they become kind of existential companions, you know, like something out of Beckett, except lighter. And here the doctor is speaking to Langostine and telling her how fascinating she is. Langostine's Villanelle. This is for Judy Moore. I'm helpless when you talk like that, the doctor said. And Langustine replied, you're like a cricket ball. I am the bat. The doctor loosened his cravat and offered to cook eggs, poached or maybe fried. He was so helpless when she spoke like that. Langustine said, yes, there's just one caveat. Afterwards, you must don the costume of a bride. He was a cricket ball and she a bat. If I must be bride, loan me your hat, the doctor said. I'd not have you defied. He might be helpless, but he spoke like that. Langustine was a born aristocrat. She was a duchess in her lobster pride. He must be cricket ball and she a bat. She knew the words, she had the talk off pat. He could not move, but shifted side to side. I'm helpless, he said, when you talk like that. The cricket ball's in play. Now go and bat. And I'll finish with two more recent poems. One very recent. This one will be in the next book, Dotage. Well, I think it's kind of self-explanatory. Dotage is an interesting word. It means old age, but it also means not quite being in your right mind anymore. Dotage. Occasionally, they hear Dotage shuffling up and down the hall, hesitating at the door, and asking in its feeble, high-pitched voice if it is time yet. Is it time? No, it is not, they answer, straightening their backs. Move away from the door, we need to use it. And so it shuffles off, mumbling to itself, disliking its own caricature gait, an ever less firm grip on irony, while they get on with life and slamming doors. I see my father with his dotage grin and watch as his eyes slowly turn to mine. Get out, Dad, I tell him. Go now while you can. Then realize he got out years ago. I put my slippers on and comb my hair, pleased to see how dark it is, like his. There are doors leading to other doors, they say, forgetting now to close them. And I'll finish with this thing, a fear of endings, which is pretty new. It might not even have got in the book. Self-explanatory again, so I don't need to introduce it, and I'll end with this. A fear of endings. How strange to live here in the universe of which our cat is as much a part as we are, as is the leaf currently shivering on the tree, so that when cat, leaf, tree, and me, and not just us, but this whole planet gets blown away by some whimsical gust, the noise we make will be zero on any universal scale. So, dear world, dear cat, dear tree, our silence is mutual, as are all our darlings on this light and silent planet that continually deafens us with its absurd tenderness and serene violence, its spitting hatreds and glorious fixations, its uproarious lawns and taciturn rivers, and our lives here in the universe, and these nebulous silences. Thank you very much for listening.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to all come off on mute and give George a round of applause, and thank you also to our forest poets Barry Coidan and Jenni Hall.